We are back for the Nichole Rice trial. Today, during this entire trial, it's been building up until this closing arguments that's happening. They got so many people to come and testify saying that Nichole seemed very guilty of killing Anita. And I expect that the closing argument for the state is going to be pretty brutal. But we'll just see if I'm correct. We're going to go ahead and watch the state's closing argument as well as the defense. Moving myself to the corner. And I'm sure that the defense will be riled up. The lawyer in this entire trial has had to keep apologizing because he gets so loud and is almost like yelling at people while they're on the stand. I'm refreshing really quick. All right, it's going.
Thank you very much for your patience. It's been a long 7 days that we've been here together. Make sure that television's on too. Or not. There we go. Okay. Now we're cooking. You've been here listening to testimony for about a week now. There's a lot of information in this case. As you heard from the witnesses, over 6,000 pages of documents, hundreds of hours of audio and video, photographs too numerous to count. So we've prepared a little bit of a PowerPoint here to help consolidate and putting together the state's closing argument. Mr. Nelson. Okay. You were told an investigation is like a puzzle. You heard that from a couple of different people. It's not solved by one person alone. Everyone's got a little piece. Every witness that we presented to you during the course of this past week has had a little piece of that puzzle. Some pieces are bigger than others. All the pieces are important, though. Some of those pieces give more information than other pieces do. If you're thinking about a jigsaw puzzle and you're looking at that, some of those edge pieces have to be laid out first before you start getting towards the center so that you can start seeing what that bigger picture is. Next. You heard from Sharon Knutson, Anita's mom. You heard that Anita was attending MSU to be an elementary teacher after she graduated from Velva High School. She worked 2 jobs, Vanity in the mall and the Fairfield Inn.
Rarely do you ever see an attorney using a PowerPoint for closing argument. Very rare.
Anita had a boyfriend in California that she spoke with on the phone. And Anita and Sharon used to go shopping together every weekend, and they spoke regularly on the phone. But that Anita didn't want Sharon to come to the apartment that she shared with the defendant because of the issues that the girls were having. You heard Sharon tell you that Anita seemed afraid of Nichole. And that Anita had Sharon put a lock, or had Gordon put a lock on her bedroom door so that she could get away from Nichole when things were getting bad between them in that apartment. Sharon told you that she last spoke with Anita the Friday before she died, that Anita had been out with her friend Michelle. You heard Sharon say that she couldn't reach Anita. She couldn't reach her in person. She couldn't reach her through work. And she became very concerned. And so that when Gordon went to Minot on Monday She wanted him to check on her. You also heard Sharon tell you about the devastating effect that Anita's death has had on this family, including the suicide of her brother Daniel a few years later. You heard Sharon herself tell you what her own mental state was like following Anita's death, and that she had a lot of blank moments in those instances. Next, please. You heard the testimony from Gordon, Anita's father, that he drove to Minot on June 4th, 2007. I'm getting a lot of feedback and echo. And then he checked in on Anita because Sharon asked him to, because Sharon hadn't been able to get a hold of him, get a hold of her. That he found Anita's apartment door locked. And so he went to go find the manager of the apartment building.
I think she's getting feedback.
Yes, we're getting a lot of feedback.
Can you just turn that one off?
Okay, let's see if that works a little bit better.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Sorgan.
That's not a problem, Your Honor. Technology. We've got gremlins. Okay. Gordon went to go find the manager of the apartment building because he couldn't get in because the door was locked. That manager was Laura Knapp, who unlocked the door to the apartment. Gordon told you that he found Anita dead, cold to the touch, in her bedroom. You next heard from Laura Knapp, the manager of the Northgate Apartments. Gordon came to her and locked that apartment, and she did. You also heard Laura tell you a lot of information about those locks, that these were specialty locks, had to go through Shook's, the locksmithing company, because these were specialty locks, heavy duty specialty locks. And that the only people who were issued keys for these apartments were the tenants on the lease, the manager, which was Laura, and maintenance, Marty. And that in order to get a copy made of that key, you couldn't just go to a locksmith. There were no key kiosks. You had to go through management because you had to go to a special locksmith to get that key copied. And Laura told you that there was never a request received for a copy of apartment number 5. Laura told you that she distinctly remembers hearing the tumblers click in that lock, that she tried the door first to open it, and it was locked, and that she put a key in the lock, turned the key, and heard the tumblers click. And then the door opened. You also heard Laura tell you about Marty, the maintenance man, who was there when Gordon came to find Laura to get the key. And that Marty was there because he and Laura lived together. And they'd lived together for about 10 years. They were in a relationship. Marty was the maintenance man for the location. He lived in the apartment with Laura that she got as a perk of her being the manager at Northgate Apartments. Laura told you that Marty committed suicide New Year's Day 2009. She told you why. He'd had problems at work, hadn't gotten a job that he was looking for, possible diagnosis of Parkinson's, and that he had no health insurance. She told you about the death of his niece a few months prior to Marty's death, that Marty's family was not nearby. They'd all left Minot by that point. New Year's Day 2009. This was right after the holidays of 2008. Thanksgiving, Christmas. You heard Laura tell you that holidays were incredibly important to Marty, that he was usually always with his family. They were a big deal. Would it take much for you to imagine that with all of this coming down on Marty, with the holidays being a depressing time without your family, that there's a question on the timing on his suicide? You also heard Laura, who lived with Marty for 10 years, say that he did not have a knife or a knife collection, that occasionally there would be tools that he would work with. Next. We brought in a slew of officers for you. First officer on the scene. At that point in time, patrol officer Plessis, now Captain Plessis. He's been with Minot PD this entire time. He's familiar with the city of Minot. He's familiar with the locations throughout the city. He pointed out to you on the map where Northgate Apartments is, clear in the northwest quadrant of town, near the airport. You heard the captain tell you that he's the acting chief of the Minot PD currently, and that he was involved in the decision to bring cold justice into the investigation, to allow them to assist the investigation. This is an important distinction here. Cold justice provided resources and time that Minot PD could not allot to this cold case. After 15 years, you heard detective after detective and the captain himself tell you how busy Minot PD's caseload was, and that people just could not catch a break to be able to get the time to sit aside to go through this case. So this was a valuable resource that was available to be able to carve out that amount of time. You heard from retired Detective Strandberg. He was the one who was at the scene, taking photographs of the apartment. And through him, we received the exhibits of the exterior of the apartment building. It's exhibits 3A through 3F, and you're going to get all these exhibits. You can go through all of these at your leisure together while you're deliberating. We have photographs 4A through D, which is the ground outside of Anita's window. We have photographs, we've only picked a few, of Anita's body at the scene. States exhibits 5A and 5B. And these are incredibly important. I'm sorry, 6A and 6B, 7A, no, 6A. Yes, 6A, 6B, my typo there, of Anita's body at the scene. In a light pink robe, face down on a dark blanket. With photographs of Anita's body after it was, or bedroom after her body was removed from the scene. And we have photographs of the screen as it was found located in Marty's shop with the cut that had been described as a backward L. And Lieutenant Strandberg also got the search warrant for Anita's phone bill to show us Anita's contact times. You heard from retired Sergeant Goodman, who was also very active in this investigation. And you learned some very important information from Sergeant Goodman. You learned there was no sign of a struggle or robbery. You learned that Anita's purse was sitting there in the bedroom with visible cash inside it, indicating no sign of a robbery. Because think about it, if someone is going to rob someplace, aren't you grabbing the visible cash out of the purse? He told you about the process of the removal of Anita's body from the scene. And again, this was highly important. He told you about the limited access of anybody to see the body, how Anita was positioned, and what she was wearing. That she was in that pink robe on that bed. Sergeant Goodman conducted a number of interviews. He also accompanied the defendant into that apartment after law enforcement processed the scene to see if anything was missing. And do you remember what he said about her reaction? Immediately, my iPod's missing. My pink iPod is missing. Without even really looking. And that this struck Sergeant Goodman as odd at the time. Sergeant Goodman also provided us with some very important information in the form of photographs that he took of Anita's cell phone. He photographed Anita's incoming and outgoing text messages, including her last outgoing text message and her last incoming text message that went unread. He also photographed the text messages between the defendant, from the defendant to Anita, complaining about that alarm clock and telling her what goes around comes around. Sergeant Goodman conducted an interview of the defendant on June 11th, 2007. And you'll have that transcript, State's Exhibit 13, to review. And he told you during his testimony that he caught the defendant in a lie during that interview about where she was at or around the time of the murder. Even though he had told her, I don't care if what you were doing was not legal. I don't care if you were smoking pot. I want to know. Don't hold anything back. And what did she do? She lied to him about her whereabouts. And she only came clean on it when he called her on it. Sergeant Goodman investigated the knife. He told you it was a cheaply made knife. It was sold in bulk. He also told you, as well as a number of other officers told you, that it was determined that the murder weapon was not the same knife that Devon Hall thought he had. You're going to hear a lot of information about that. Devon Hall thought he had that knife because the medallion was missing on one side. But remember, this was a cheap knife, a cheap folding knife. Would it come as any surprise to anybody, that something that's cheaply made might have more than one of those cheaply made knives, might have a medallion fallen off of it? I don't know if anybody's been keeping up with the news about panels falling off of Cybertrucks and that there's a mass recall with regards to that. That's certainly not a cheaply made item, but it's happening on more than one item that was produced. Sergeant Goodman followed up on the Devon Hall lead and ruled him out. Went to Wolf Point, interviewed him. Interviewed a number of people who confirmed Devon Hall's statement that he was not in Minot on June 2nd, 2007. That he did not get there until the evening hours of June 3rd, 2007, by which point in time Anita was already dead. Next, please. You heard from Jordan Thompson, who's now with parole and probation after retiring from the Minot Police Department. You got to see the reenactment video, State's Exhibit 14. And again, you'll have access to that. What did we learn from this? That the window would not have been the point of exit. That it was extremely difficult for them to get in and out. You saw that yourselves, that it was difficult for Jordan Thompson, Dave Goodman, and Evelyn Jones, all three of them, getting in and out. The screen would have been ripped or damaged. The items below or in the windowsill would have been disturbed. You saw Evelyn sitting in the window to get in and out. You saw Jordan have to take great pains to hop around so as to try not to rip the screen out of the frame. But one other thing I want you to remember about that reenactment video. Whenever you saw somebody go into that window, they disappeared. You didn't see them. Remember that when there's a question about whether or not Anita could be seen by Marty as he's dealing with that screen, as he's just quickly plucking it out of the window and taking it back to his workshop. You heard from retired Detective Barnard, who went on to become sheriff of Ford County before he retired again, off to Arizona. He was the first detective at the scene. You heard him testify that he had to have Chuck LeBoy point the body out to him because even though he was standing right outside that window, looking in, actively looking for that body, he could not see it. He had to have it pointed out to him by another officer. He told you about the difficulty that law enforcement had in getting the defendant to come to the scene to meet with them. You heard Detective Barnard tell you what was conveyed. There's an emergency at your apartment. We need you to come home. And then you heard him tell you about her behavior when she finally did show up, after law enforcement had to threaten to come get her. She had a flat affect during the notification at the scene of Anita being killed. Didn't seem concerned. And most telling to Detective Barnard, she didn't ask any questions. And that normally, when someone is told, there's an emergency at my home. What? What is it? Why are the police at my house? Why do the police need me? What is going on? No questions. Didn't ask who, what, why, what's going on, nothing. Sergeant Barnard was present for the initial video of the apartment, which you, in conjunction with the photographs, you can see this is a tiny little apartment. Tiny little apartment. He took the first two statements from the defendant on June 4th. You'll also have the transcripts of those. And he also told you that the investigators did not give the defendant any of the holdback information. And he told you why. We want to know what you know without influence from us. You heard from Dale Meixner, the BCI agent, conducted an interview with the defendant on May 6, 2010. That's State's Exhibit 19. You'll have that transcript too. That also was analyzed by Sergeant Asham. Next, please. You heard from Dr. Marianne Sens, the pathologist who performed Anita's autopsy. And you'll get a copy of the autopsy report. You have it in evidence, the anatomical diagram, the photographs. And I will warn you that these are graphic photographs. And we've refrained from showing them to you thus far, but you will have them. Dr. Sens indicated that Anita had been face down shortly after her death, based on the livor mortis, the lividity, the darkening of the body, where the blood pools due to gravity. And that was how she was found. You heard Dr. Sens tell you there were no hesitation marks and there were no defensive wounds found on Anita's hands. That Anita's cause of death was 2 stab wounds to the chest, and that one of the wounds was fatal within minutes. And she told you that that manner of death was homicide. And I also asked Dr. Sens how much force was needed in order to cause these stab wounds. And she told you not much force. It went through the cartilage, the soft part of the sternum. It didn't require somebody to be very strong or have a lot of upper body strength to do this. Next, please. We heard from Amy Gebhardt in the State Crime Lab, who analyzed the DNA. And she determined for you that the blood on the knife was Anita's blood. That gives us the murder weapon. And that the blood, or the DNA from the cut in the screen, was also Anita's. Now, Amy did mention that there was male DNA under one of Anita's fingernails, one fingernail, but that was a sample that was too small to compare. You have also heard testimony that there is no timestamp on DNA. DNA is everywhere. I could brush past you and my DNA would be on you. Next, please. You heard from Michaela Talbot, now with St. Paul PD. She was part of the new investigation. She was partnered with Sergeant Asham. They interviewed numerous witnesses. They split this investigation up. Detective Talbot handled the part of the case involving Devon Hall. And she was able to rule out Devon Hall by establishing again that he did not arrive in Minot until after Anita was dead. And she did this by talking to collateral sources, by confirming with people who were with him at that time, he was not here in Minot. Not here in Minot. I would normally be saying here in Minot if I were back in Ward County. Next, please. You heard from Matt Hansen. Matt was the defendant's boss at eTelecare. And he told you about what happened the day that they were notified of Anita's death. They didn't even tell you there was notification about Anita's death. The police called saying they needed to get a hold of Nichole. There was an emergency at her apartment. She needed to come home. What was her response? Not, what's going on? Why do the police need me? What's happening? Or, oh my goodness, I need to get there quick. It was, that's just my crackhead roommate. I'm not dealing with it. Matt didn't tell her anything about her roommate. Why'd she leap to that assumption? Then Matt told her again. The police called back. He advised the police, I've already given her the message. And the police told him that if she didn't come, they were going to come get her. Then she finally went to the scene. Matt also told you that the defendant won a sales trip because she was a good salesperson at eTelecare. But she ended up not going to it because she quit shortly thereafter. Please. Then you heard from Donna Bieland. You probably remember her sitting up on the stand, wearing her visor and her sunglasses because she's got issues that cause light sensitivity. She worked next to the defendant for several months at eTelecare. At that call center, open spaces, the defendant would constantly come. She'd park herself next to Donna. And Donna remembers crystal clear that first conversation with the defendant. What do you think of a roommate who leaves her alarm clock on and locks her door? First impression. And then from there, it was constant, according to Donna. Constant complaints from Nichole about her roommate. Donna told you about the fish tank incident, that there had been 3 separate occasions, and eventually the fish died. And that the defendant reacted like Anita had crossed a line, that she went from being a bad roommate to being an evil person. Donna also told you about the day after the defendant had an interview with law enforcement, and we know from the timeline when that would have been. We know that Sergeant Goodman interviewed her on June 11th. We know that the defendant had been interviewed on June 4th initially at the scene, but that she didn't go back to work on June 5th. So we know it wasn't the day after that interview. Interview with Goodman, June 11th, which means that she spoke to Donna on June 12th, because the next interview with law enforcement wasn't until 2010, and she wasn't working at eTelecare at that time. Why would I need to cut a screen? I had a key. I wouldn't need to do that to get at her. Remember the holdbacks. Remember that the defendant never saw that screen on the window. Law enforcement never saw the screen on the window. They were led to it by Marty and Nell. And you will get the transcripts from June 4th and June 11th, her interviews with law enforcement. Not once is that screen mentioned in those interviews. Not once. But she tells Donna, they think I did it. I wouldn't need to cut a screen. I had a key. And she told Donna, I'll be okay as long as I keep my mouth shut. And you heard Donna's impression that she thinks at that point the defendant said too much, because then she said, you do not want to make me mad. Donna didn't realize that she was even talking to her at that point. But the defendant was looking right at Donna. You do not want to make me mad. Next. You heard from April, one of the friends. She told you that following another one of the defendant's interviews with law enforcement, the only thing she seemed concerned about was her missing iPod. My pink iPod better not be missing. Next. You heard from Michelle, another friend. Michelle gave us a timeline. She was with Anita the Friday before she died. Michelle went and got a tattoo. Anita chickened out. She was supposed to get one too. And then the girls went to Schatz Crossroads, the truck stop, for a meal afterward. Why is that important? Because when the officers were interviewing and talking to Tyler, Tyler mentioned that Anita was going to a truck stop. She went with Michelle. Next. William May, the defendant's former boyfriend, was present at a party, a house party that he was having. And the defendant was drunk. She was intoxicated. But she said, I did it. I killed Anita. Mr. Whitmay told you about how he went to the police with this information. And we acknowledged there is no record of this interview. We acknowledge that. But he did tell you as well that the next day, he asked the defendant about that statement. She didn't deny killing Anita. She denied saying the statement. There is a big distinction there. Next, please. You heard from Christina Holler, formerly Christina Imhoff. House party, defendant drunk, being picked on about Anita's death. She gave the defendant a ride home, and then they talked in the defendant's apartment, where the defendant told her, I was fighting with my roommate over an alarm clock. She was wearing a white bathrobe. I stabbed my roommate. They had a falling out because the defendant was possessive and angry. Ms. Holler also said she went to the police before. Again, we acknowledge there's no record of that. But this was before the two had a falling out. Now, the defense is probably going to tell you that some of this information from some of these witnesses is largely influenced by cold justice and the airing of the documentary. You saw those pictures of Anita wearing a pink bathrobe. If Christina was trying to comport her information to what was learned through cold justice or to the evidence, wouldn't she have said that bathrobe was pink? She told you what she remembered the defendant telling her, that it was white. That was her memory of what was said to her. Fighting over an alarm clock, my roommate was in a white bathrobe, I stabbed her. Next, please. You heard from Connie Euland. And these were a little disjointed because we had to fly people in from out of town. We couldn't get Connie here until yesterday. Connie's Marty's sister. She also reiterated Marty had no family living nearby in Minot at around the time of his death. Mom had moved away. Connie was living in Minnesota. She confirmed the death of her niece, of Marty's niece, a few months before Marty's death, just like Laura told you about. She confirmed that holidays were very important to Marty, that he was the best gift giver. She told you about their family history of alcoholism and of suicide. But she also gave you some additional information. That Marty was having problems with Laura. That Laura showed up with another man at the funeral, after Marty's funeral. What was Marty losing by that? The love of his life that he'd been with for 10 years. The apartment that he lived in, because that was Laura's through Northgate Apartments. And his job, because Laura was his boss, because she was the manager and he was just the maintenance man. And when Connie was asked what losing Laura would do to Marty, she said it would crush him. It would crush him. Add that to what you already know from Laura of what was going on in Marty's life at around the time of Marty's suicide. All of this compounding itself. Is it any wonder that the man committed suicide? Next, please. You heard from Robin Thompson, another friend that we had to fly in. Friend of both Anita's and the defendants from high school. After Anita's death, she found that the defendant had one of Anita's stuffed toys in her closet and asked her about it. And she also told you that at the funeral, or after the funeral, the defendant told her that Money Mike was talking about that he had killed Anita at the funeral. Next, please. You heard from Mark and Brenda Glynns. This is the defendant's aunt and uncle. Brenda was the defendant's other mama. You heard her tell that. And you could see how difficult this was for Brenda up on the stand, testifying as to this, talking against her own blood, against the girl that she was incredibly close to for a number of years. She told you about a trip that she took back from New Mexico after rodeo finals with Nichole, in Nichole's car to move her back from New Mexico to North Dakota. And they talked about this case because they were in the car together for a couple days. And they were very close. And that the defendant told Brenda that she would never get the image of Anita out of her head, laying there so peaceful in her robe covered up. She told her aunt about the bowl in the bathroom sink and that the killer washed their hands and cleaned up the knife afterward. She told her aunt that the killer laid in wait in Nichole's bedroom for Anita to get out of the shower and then attacked her. And she also told her Aunt Brenda that she had gone back to Minot after she went to the 41 Club to get clothes. And we know from investigation that the defendant went to the 41 Club Saturday night and was there late. And you could tell that this was incredibly difficult for Brenda to express. The defendant would refer to Anita as a fucking bitch, a fucking cunt. You heard Mark corroborate that Brenda took that trip for rodeo and that he was also present at a time when the murder was discussed. And one of the cousins asked Nichole if she was okay. And if the defendant's response was, she was fine. I never really liked Anita anyway. Next, please. Last state's witness, Sergeant Asham. She analyzed the phone records of Anita and of the defendant. Both of these are in evidence. She went through these photographs from Sergeant Goodman, determining when was the last message sent from Anita, when was the last message received that she never opened, confirming that Anita was most definitely still alive as of 2 a.m. on Sunday morning the 3rd, because she'd had a phone call with her boyfriend out in California, and he recognized her voice. She conducted another interview of the defendant on March 12th, 2022. You'll have that transcript as well. And she reviewed the defendant's prior statements to the other detectives over the years, as well as her statements to her Aunt Brenda. Yep. Mr. Nelson switching this over for me, because we have another PowerPoint for you on this one. The timeline of these statements. Timeline 1, the June 4th, 2007 statements to Detective Barnard, where the defendant says she was at that point in time. Timeline number 2, the June 11th, 2007 statements to Sergeant Goodman. Where was she then? Timeline 3, the May 6, 2010 statements to Agent Meixner. Where was she? And timeline number 4, the March 12th, 2022 statement to Sergeant Asham. As you can see, there's a lot of gap here. We're looking at June 1st, 2007. Indicates at about 11:15 p.m. the defendant arrived back at the apartment. On June 4th, 2007, she said she got home. She heard Anita in her room, but didn't see her. June 11th, she returned home from work and heard Anita talking with someone. In 2010, she said she saw Anita at the fridge getting something to eat. And on the 4th, she didn't even remember if Anita was home. 1 a.m. on May 6th, the 2010 interview, she heard Anita open the front door. It's the only time she ever mentions this. Got up at 7 a.m., left for Velva without seeing Anita because her door was closed. Next one on that, please. Okay. We have varying timelines of when she arrived in Velva, when she was in Sykeston. The timeline number 4 from March 12th, the gray one. Unclear of the beginning time when she went to Sykeston. This is when we start getting things a little bit fuzzy here as to where she was and who she was with. We've got all sorts of different stories. As you can see from the May 6th timeline, arrived at the farm, fell asleep on the couch. No specified timeline at the Russo 41 Club. Watching movies with Alyssa, went back to sleep on the couch. Timeline number 4 here. Went to Russo until 11 p.m., never mentions going to Alyssa's house at all. Next, please. Inconsistent across the board of where she was on June 3rd and what she was doing until she went to work to be at work on time on June 4th. If you could back up one more, please, Chris. Oh, could you go back a slide? Sorry. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Now, as you heard the defense's own expert testify, no one had eyes on the defendant from about 11:30 p.m. until 8:30 the next morning. You heard officers testify how far of a drive it is from that farm in Velva to Minot, to the apartment. It's about 40 minutes. She had a window of opportunity of 9.5 hours. Go back to the right slide, please. Sorry, I'm making him do all sorts of technical stuff. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So we're bringing it all together for you. First step, we establish means, motive, and opportunity. Means is the ability to have committed the crime. Motive, the reason why a crime was committed. Now, we don't have to prove motive to you, but sometimes it's helpful in determining someone's intent. And opportunity, the time or availability to have committed the crime. Next. Step 2, review of the persons of interest in this case. We look at people's alibis. We look at their means, their motive, and their opportunity. And they are excluded by investigative tools. Please. So person of interest number 1, Tyler Schmaltz. The investigation showed you he hadn't spoken with Anita on the phone or texted with her in over a month. It also showed he moved into the apartment complex at Northgate before Anita did. He was living with his brother, who also alibied him, as well as people that he was playing online games with. He had no opportunity to do this. And he's been an active voice for justice for Anita for over the years. We've heard that testimony as well. Next, please. Next person we look to is Michael Van, Money Mike. He was interested in dating Anita. They're getting to know each other. He didn't have a motive to kill her. The last text message he sent at 4:53 a.m., you don't answer, went unread. It's the last message that was sent to Anita that she hadn't opened. That gives us a timeline. Money Mike, through the investigation, was alibied by his friends. He was at a party. No opportunity to have committed this murder. And no means. He didn't know where Anita lived. The investigation concluded he didn't know where she lived. No means, no motive, no opportunity. Michael Van's out. Next, please. Next person of interest is Marty Annell. Marty led law enforcement to the cut screen. As we already established through defense's expert, if you're going to create a scene, if you're going to stage a crime scene, you're going to cut the screen and you're going to leave it to be found, aren't you? Marty didn't leave it in the window. Marty took it to his shop, where he showed it to Laura and then told law enforcement about it. If Marty were going to stage this scene to look like a break-in, don't you think he would have left that screen in that window for law enforcement to find, or somebody other than him? No. Marty went about his rounds, doing his job, saw a cut screen, damaged screen, takes it, puts it in the shop. You heard about the issues in Marty's life. He committed suicide 18 months after Anita died. The death of his niece, right after the holidays, which were important to him and his family. No family support around. Losing the love of his life, possibly losing his job too, and where he lived. And a family history of alcoholism and suicide. Wave after wave after wave crashing in on this man. But most importantly, Marty was alibied by Laura Knapp that entire weekend. She testified that they worked in tandem with each other. He'd be fixing something while she was cleaning an apartment. There was never any significant period of time he wasn't with her. And they lived together. Now, you heard the defense experts say that you wouldn't expect somebody to have an alibi witness during their sleeping hours. Do you think that that's true of your romantic partner who you share a bed with? Marty may have had means, no opportunity, no motive. Next, please. The jogger, the running man, as we've heard talked about. This came about because of a description from Becky Ehrman based on a sketch that was released in the media in October of 2008. And shortly thereafter, Adam Raper came forward and said, I think that was me. I was running that area. And you heard the testimony. He matches the sketch. Possible opportunity, no means, no motive. Next, please. And a lot's been done about Devon Hall. There's been a lot of talk about Devon Hall. Devon Hall breaks into people's apartments. Not going to sugarcoat it. It's what he does. But he is bad at it because he keeps getting caught. And including, notably caught, for a break-in on June 11th on Sioux Street. Clear on the other side of the city. Opposite quadrants. That he was highly intoxicated when he was arrested. His aunt lived in the apartment building that he was arrested at over on Sioux Street. But most importantly, he was not in Minot when Anita was killed. How do we know this? Because of the investigation that was done. He was in Wolf Point, Montana for a graduation. The investigation showed there had been police contact at that hotel that they were staying at because the boys were breaking into the kitchen on the evening of June 2nd. June 3rd, they took the train back from Wolf Point to Minot, corroborated by other people in that group who traveled with him, not all of whom were family, as it was acknowledged. Next, please. And Jerome Vivier. You alibied Devon Hall, you alibied Jerome Vivier too, because they were together in Wolf Point on the day of Anita's murder. No opportunity, no means. Yeah, Jerome Vivier, he's been convicted of gross sexual imposition. So that's a possible motive. However, if you remember the testimony, and you'll also see this from the autopsy report as well that you have, Anita was not sexually assaulted. There was no sign of sexual assault. The victim in Jerome's GSI case was known to him. And when did that occur? On May 20th of 2007. You heard testimony, you heard some evidence that Jerome was at the 101 Club on May 19th, 2007, the same date Anita was. But you also heard testimony that those two arrived over half an hour apart. There was no indication that they had any interaction whatsoever at the club, or that he wasn't paying attention to anyone in particular in the club. There's no indication that he could have found out where Anita lived, that he'd followed her when she left the club to see where she lived, that he'd interacted with her, that he'd looked at her driver's license to see her address, or anything like that. And then the next night, he's raping someone else in Minot. Not Anita. Next, please. So now our last person of interest, Nichole Thomas Rice. Means she had access to the apartment with a key. The murder weapon was found on Anita's bed. Motive, an extremely toxic living arrangement between these two girls. The text messages from Nichole, I'm not going to live like this. What goes around comes around. An opportunity. Statements from her alibi witnesses and her leave large gaps of time unaccounted for. Even the defense's own expert acknowledges that. She can't be accounted for between 11:30 and 8:30. And that this murder occurred right around 5 a.m., right smack in the middle of that window. And that it is only a 40-minute drive from that apartment back to the farm. You heard the officers tell you she was the only person who could not be eliminated as a suspect. And the defense's own expert confirms that as well. She could not be ruled out. Next, please. So we bring it all together, the final pieces of this puzzle. Next. Suspect, Nichole Thomas Rice. The only person who could not be ruled out. The only person elevated from the level of person of interest to suspect. The only person with means and motive and opportunity. Her rendition of events has changed significantly several times during interviews. No reaction, no questions, no concerns. The only thing that she was concerned about was that pink iPod. Declared it missing before even entering the room, according to Sergeant Goodman. And that struck him as odd. But he wasn't the only one that found her concern over this pink iPod, instead of Anita, distressing. You heard that from Goodman, you heard that from Barnard, and you heard that from April. And then we've got the statements to William May and Christina. I did it. I was arguing with my roommate. She was wearing a bathrobe. We were arguing about the alarm clock, and I stabbed her. Next, please. So we're summing up for you what the evidence shows. That the point of entrance and exit was the front door. The deadbolt was in place. A key was needed to make that entry. And more importantly, a key was needed to lock that door behind you. You could not pull that shut and have it lock behind you. It had to be locked with a key from the outside. Wouldn't that just be muscle memory to do that as you're leaving, if you're the person that lives there? Pull it shut, lock it, keep going. And we know it was locked because Laura Knapp distinctly remembers hearing those tumblers click when she unlocked it. And we know that the killer didn't have Anita's keys because Anita's keys were returned to Gordon by Detective Barnard at a later date. They were in her purse. We know the window was not the point of entry or exit. Anita's blood was in the cut on the screen and nowhere else on that screen. Only in the cut from the evidence that you heard, which means that it was made with the knife that was used to stab Anita, which means that screen wasn't cut before she was stabbed, which means that that screen was not the way into the room. You can't go through a cut that hasn't been made. You heard the testimony that there was dust and cobwebs in and around the window and the windowsill, and that this was not disturbed. That's another way you can tell that no one went in or out of that window. The reenactment video shows you that the items in and around the window would have been disturbed, that those dust and those cobwebs would have been disturbed, and also showed you that that screen would have been stretched and ripped in a manner that it was not. You heard tell about the stuff that was underneath Anita's window, that she had things kind of precariously stacked. And you heard the detectives tell you that when they entered the window through that reenactment, they stepped on the floor. Not on the bed, on the floor. Because that's where you go through where that cut would have been. That backward L would have stepped on the floor. All that stuff would have come cascading down if someone had done that, entering through that window. The evidence showed you there were no signs of a robbery or a sexual assault. Her money, her cash in her purse was still there. The photos show you her television was still there. Her phone. All these little items that could have been stolen and taken, nothing's missing. No sexual assault. The evidence showed you this toxic relationship between them, the fish tank that resulted in dead fish, the alarm clock, the nasty text messages, and the installation of a lock on Anita's door so that she could take herself away from Nichole when things got bad in that apartment and put a locked door between the two of them. Next, please. The evidence further showed the defendant had knowledge about that crime scene that she should not have had. The statements that she made to her Aunt Brenda before any information became public or was disclosed by law enforcement to anyone outside of law enforcement. That bowl of water in the bathroom sink. That had been removed when the crime scene was processed before she was allowed to come in. That wasn't there when she was let in by law enforcement. How'd she know it was even there? They never told her about it. Anita having been in the shower before her death. You heard the testimony. There was no physical evidence at the scene that she'd been in the shower. That was pieced together from the text messages that she had with Michael Vann. That she wasn't feeling well and that she was going to take a shower. Anita had been dead over a day by the time that she was found. There's no indication that her hair was wet. Would have been dry by that point. Anita being in a bathrobe and the position of her body. You heard from Goodman, from Strandberg, and from Barnard the process for removing this body. And that the defendant had not been in that apartment before that body was removed. You heard that they laid her in the body bag. A dark body bag. You can't see through it. You heard Barnard tell you in detail about those body bags. And that when the notification was done, the identification, they unzipped it just a little ways so that the person making the identification could see her face. Wasn't unzipped enough to see that she was wearing a bathrobe. And then you have the statement to Donna Bjelland about the cut screen. But before I get into that, the bathrobe again. She mentioned that to Christina. Remember, my roommate was wearing a bathrobe when I stabbed her. But on to Donna, talking about the cut screen. Again, remember, we know when she talked to Donna, based on the fact that we know when she talked to Sergeant Goodman. Because it was the day after she talked to Goodman, and the Goodman interview was June 11th, 2007. And once again, law enforcement did not tell the defendant about the cut in the screen during those interviews. And that screen was not in the window for her to have seen it herself, even if she was just milling about. And law enforcement was adamant about what they held back in this case. The bowl of water in the bathroom, Anita's body and what she was wearing, her position on the bed, the cut in the screen, These are important holdbacks. And these are all pieces of information the defendant possessed and conveyed to people at times when she should not have had that information. And as you heard the defense's own expert say, the only logical conclusion is that she was there. Next, please. So again, these inconsistent statements to law enforcement and to others. Next. And the confessions. I did it. I was arguing with her about an alarm clock. She was wearing a white bathrobe, and I stabbed her. Ladies and gentlemen, taking the totality of all of this information, eliminating the other persons of interest through investigation, there is only one conclusion to be drawn. Most importantly, from the defendant's knowledge and her admissions. Admissions to friends, and what she told her Aunt Brenda, whose heart was breaking about this. There's only one conclusion to be drawn, and that is that in the early morning hours of June 3rd, 2007, Nichole Rice took this knife and plunged it into the chest of this girl and killed her. The state asks you to find her guilty once you conclude your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sorgan. Mr. Sand, do you wish to make a closing argument?
Oh, yes, I do, sir.
All right.
I thought the state did a good idea. She wasn't as emotionally riled up as I thought she would be, but I think she did good.
Can you hear me all right? Okay. Can you all hear me? Okay. There's been some issues with that, so thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here. I know this is probably the last thing anybody here wants to do. All the time and energy that you guys have expelled, taking a week out of your life, sitting on a case like this. It's a lot of stress, and I'm sure your family and your work lives have suffered for it, so thank you very much. It's important. As citizens, it's important for Anita, and it's important for Nichole. Now, we just sat through over an hour of slides, trying to go through every piece of this case, every piece of testimony, every witness. And I'll tell you, usually when you're a defense attorney, your job is to try to snake through a hole. You got to make things just work right. This case is totally flipped. They just took you through an hour of slides where they had to go through about 300 elements that have to work perfectly for them. All of them have to be true for their case to work. Devin Hall got on the train at the time some guy in Wolf Point said he got on the train. They don't have evidence for that. She's saying that. The investigation showed. The investigation didn't show that. Otherwise, the FBI wouldn't have said Devin Hall was the most likely suspect. But I'll get back to Devin Hall. They talked to you about Marty Annell. Never left Laura Knapp's side, but she's screwing around on him. They never leave each other's sides. That's not true, and that didn't happen. But it has to be true for their case to work. Their case doesn't work. Their own lead investigator, Detective Asham, told you guys she didn't review the whole file. That's not bad police work. That's insane to bring charges when you haven't reviewed a file. They're trying to say this is a puzzle with many pieces. No, it's a murder case. And everybody in here deserves justice. Anita and Nichole, and this isn't how you get it. And I don't mean to yell at you guys. I'm not yelling at you. I'm blown away by what I'm seeing here. I've been practicing law for quite a while. I've never seen anything like this. So we got a case agent who didn't review the file. You heard from our expert. I'm going to call him Agent Coons, not our expert. We had to bring in our own expert. I've never done that before because I've never seen an investigation like this. We had to have the entire case reinvestigated at Nichole's expense to figure out what happened here because they don't know. All of their conclusions that they're bringing to you are just the conclusions that they needed to put her in that chair right now. Devin wasn't there. Devin told you, we read the report. I've been breaking into houses since I was here. Oh, it just perfectly lined up that he wasn't on the train. He was breaking in somewhere else at that point. This is crazy. I had Detective Asham on the stand. I said, you're aware he broke into that apartment? She goes, well, he actually broke into 2 that day. Unreal. A detective who didn't read the case file. I've never seen anything like that. It's insane. We discussed in jury selection and at opening that they're going to tell you that this is a murder case based on an alarm clock and nasty text messages between 2 18-year-old girls. I can walk around this town and find all of those people. 90% of the girls in this town are going to have those same issues that go to UND here. This sophisticated murderer sitting right here, Nichole, was able to scrub the DNA out of that place. They showed you the murder weapon. I'm not even going to dig around. You've seen it 20 times. Her DNA is not on it. In fact, the only DNA they have is from a man. Nichole's not a man. This is 2025. This isn't Perry Mason in 1950. They're trying to use conjecture and hearsay to convince you guys that Nichole got out of bed in the middle of the night, drove to Minot, killed her roommate, scrubbed the scene of DNA. She's this mastermind mob hit killer. Goes back home, has the intestinal fortitude to just go on with life like it never happened. We're talking about a daughter, a sister, a wife, and a mother. This doesn't happen. This is a load of crap. Now, I talked to you at jury selection. I talked to you on opening arguments. This TV show came to town. What a coincidence. The TV show comes to town, and we're getting charges. They came to town for 7 days. They're telling you in their closing that the Minot Police Department's so busy, they can't get things right. And there's a whole heck of a lot more we heard about the Minot Police Department that I'm not going to get into because we don't need to relive some of the accusations and the things that have gone on with the Minot Police Department. But they bring in a television show for a week, and they're going to blow this case wide open. You heard from Agent Coons, the show came in, it had an agenda. The agenda was to put Nichole in that chair right there. Because that's what gets people watching these things. And that's what they care about. They don't care who did this. They care who's watching that TV. You see all these cameras in here. And when this is over, you'll find out a lot more about what's going on here. This is a media circus. And it's a media circus because they can put her in that chair, and these people helped them do it. And it's garbage. And they should be ashamed of themselves, all 3 of them.
Objection.
Sustained.
I'll back off.
Thank you.
The show comes in, the charges come out. The week-long investigation commences with 2 people from Hollywood. We're trying to clear your brother Marty. How can we figure that out? We don't consider Devin Hall a suspect. Why? They don't even have the train records. The guy's breaking into houses all over Minot with knives, women's apartments, saying, I've been doing this since I was here. Not a suspect. Because these cameras wouldn't be in here if he was. If the dead guy was the suspect, these cameras wouldn't be in here. These cameras are in here because we can have a nice North Dakota mom sitting there. That sells. And it's disgusting. And it's not our system of justice. It's greed. And that greed's putting pressure on these people. And we sat up here for 6 days. And person after person, officer after officer, we heard inconsistent statements. Oh, I don't remember, it was so long ago. I don't remember, can you show me the report that I never looked at, that I never read before we brought charges? Sure. I spent half my week up here. Yep, here it is, here it is. This is what happened. You should have reviewed it before you put her sitting in that chair. But when that happens, oh, it's been a long time. It's an inconsistent statement. When Nichole, who comes in for every interview, talks to law enforcement every time they ask her, when she makes a mistake, when she can't remember something just right, she's guilty. We're putting her in that chair. And here come the cameras. She's the only one who's not allowed to have 10 minutes wrong or get interviewed 18 years after something happens and have one element wrong. She came in every time, no lawyer. Not all the other suspects you can say that about. 18 years. She was 18 years old when this happened. That was 18 years ago. They've been interviewing her over and over and over again. Of course they're going to get interviewed for 18 years. But when other people, for their case, for what they need to put her there, when those other people make inconsistent statements, it's forgiven. When the cops make inconsistent statements, when the cops tell you they didn't review the case, it's forgiven. It's madness. I have never sat through a case where I've had to sit here with 7,000 pages. You probably noticed how slow I was going. I'm going through 7,000 pages in my head to make sure they understand what happened because they didn't do the work. The investigation happened in here. The investigation happened with Agent Coons. They didn't review the file. They said that. That's insane. To put somebody sitting in a chair for murder without reviewing the file. On top of not reviewing the file, I'm going to take myself back up here. Detective Asham, did you have trouble gathering the evidence? No, we got all the evidence. Well, I thought you said you had trouble gathering it. I show her a report where Devin Hall says that he came to mine on the 2nd. On the bottom of the report, it says, this has been recorded and will be put into evidence. Do you have that? No, we don't. You don't have that. That's bad police work at best. You know what it is at worst. The state brought in a bunch of witnesses. It was a cast of characters. The TV show comes out, the phone starts ringing. You have two people who all of a sudden have an admission, an alleged admission. I did it. Everybody's blackout drunk at a party. I did it. One guy's got drug problems. We're more than grateful for his service in the military, no doubt. He's admitted he was in St. Cloud for rehab. They get in touch with each other prior to talking to police after the show comes out. And they say, yeah, we reported this multiple times back in 2008. This is one of the biggest murder cases in North Dakota history. And the cops just ignored that? No, they didn't call in. This is another load of crap. Donna Bieland can't remember when she worked with Nichole. She can't remember where the office is. She says Nichole's parents forced her to clean up the murder scene and then made her sleep in a shed. I was laughing during the testimony. This is crazy. She's sitting up here with Coke bottle sunglasses on and a banker's hat. Like they went off and found her on the street. And they want to put her in prison with that crap? Are you kidding me? They sit here talking about holdbacks. Aunt Brenda, she proved the holdbacks about that trip. Aunt Brenda said the trip was in 2007, 4 to 5 weeks after Anita died. She was totally wrong. She was a year off. Those holdbacks had most likely been given to the press at that point. Michelle Grubb, when she testified, if you can keep all this straight, had said she knew Nichole was stabbed. This stuff comes out in these towns. They're basing all of these holdbacks on this testimony of Aunt Brenda, good old Aunt Brenda. She's not sitting in here right now, I'll tell you that. Aunt Brenda had it a year off, and she was so sure of it. We were going to my son's rodeo in Farmington. We took my husband's plane. You're a year off, Aunt Brenda, sorry. They're asking you to find this girl guilty on 20-year-old hearsay. It's baloney. Think about this for a second. She leaves her family house in the middle of the night, goes in, kills her roommate, who's got a lock on her door. Like Dexter cleans the scene. No DNA, scrubbed. Nichole lives in this apartment. There's no DNA. Her DNA's not on the knife. Her DNA's not on Anita. And then she texts her after, long after. The state expects you to believe that she did that and came home and went on with her life. You see her sitting here. That's not James Bond. This didn't happen. Then the state's got the gall to ask Agent Coons why we didn't do more work investigating this case. We did a heck of a lot of work, and we have no obligation. We have no obligation to hire investigators and to hire experts and everything else to do an investigation that they didn't do. They admittedly didn't do. They didn't review the files. It's Nichole's job. That's a terrifying thing. If you're an American citizen, you got to hire your own police because they're not doing it. You heard from a few witnesses that were law enforcement from Minot back in the day. You heard from Agent Coons. The FBI fingered Devin Hall. He said that's who we're going to look into. Who's the one suspect that they didn't look into when they reopened the case, when cold justice showed up? Devin Hall. You know why? Because it would have been a problem for them. They wouldn't have been able to get Nichole in that seat. And these TVs wouldn't have been lit up and people wouldn't have been making millions of dollars. And I can't harp on this enough. It's 2025. And we're taking a cold case with no new physical evidence, no genetic evidence, no DNA. When you guys go back, look at that DNA report. Look who wasn't tested. They got male DNA under a fingernail. Read through those names, see who wasn't tested. You're going to be surprised. In their opening, the state's attorney said, crime loves silence. Nichole went in every time the police asked her to come in for an interview. She wasn't hiding from this. There were people that were. What you're seeing here is a totally unprepared police department and state's attorney's office. You're seeing baseless charges, and they're going after an innocent woman because they're pressured. You have no idea what these TV cameras do to these people. And I'm not blasting police. Police are good people. But what you're seeing in this case is garbage. It's absolute garbage. It's insanity. You heard it from Agent Coons. I can't state it enough. They didn't read the file before they charged her. We read the file before they did. They keep telling you that their big issue is this hunch on Nichole because of her behavior. And then you heard, and you'll see it in the transcripts, top of the transcript, Nichole was crying at the scene when she got there. I can't make these police testify to what they said. I've shown them a lot, but that doesn't sound like what they were saying. She's crying. She's not acting stoic. She's crying. They asked her, they brought her into the apartment. Is anything missing? Yeah, my iPod is. Now all of a sudden they're latching onto that. Cops are asking you a question. What's missing? It looks like my iPod's missing. She should have just said nothing and lawyered up. Instead, she tried to help them out. That was a bad idea with these people. People like Nichole don't kill people over alarm clocks. We know that. Toxic roommate. They're telling you, read the texts. Look at the alarm clock. The fish. We all went to college. I went to college. Everybody's been in plenty of disputes with their siblings and roommates. We talked about this at opening and during jury selection. People like Nichole don't kill people over that. I've told you that before. It's true. This is a case based on hearsay and speculation from 20 years ago. I don't think there's anybody in here that doesn't want justice for Anita. She deserves it. There's no doubt, but there isn't justice for Anita in here. Nichole didn't do this. And on jury selection, we talked about guilty go free or innocent go to prison. Nichole didn't do this. The killer's out there, and this needs to be solved. But it's not going to be solved in here today because the work wasn't done. The work had to be done by Nichole. She had to hire ex-FBI agents, a team of attorneys. She had to do that. That's not her job. That's not your jobs. That's the police's job. It's their job to look into the file, to read the file. Not to have I can't link anything more to the fact that Cold Justice came into town and they charged this case more than the fact that they said they didn't read the whole file. They didn't review the file. I'm showing them things they haven't seen before. I showed Detective Asham that train report. She was shocked. Wolf Point to Minot, end of May through June 10th. No Devon Hall on there. Our case is shot. All of a sudden, he slipped a guy at 20. That's what I'm telling you. They just went through all these slides, hundreds of elements that have to work perfectly for them, for this case to work for them. It's crazy. If one of those falls out of place, this case doesn't work. Crime loves silence. Nichole participated all the way along. This is madness. State's Attorney Sorgan told you DNA is everywhere. DNA is in the air. If I touch this, my DNA is there. Not Nichole's. I don't know what, she's got special DNA, I guess. She lives in the apartment. They don't have her DNA. No DNA on the murder weapon. They're so sure of what went on with this screen. Their detectives never saw it. Their investigators never saw it. The only person here that testified it was Gordon. He said it was out in the yard. Marty's dead. We can't talk to him. And then a couple days later, you got Devon Hall saying, I'm coming in and out of the windows, in and out, twice in one day, with a knife. This is terrifying that this case was brought. It's absolutely terrifying. And I used the term abortion of justice, and I know that's a heavy term. I don't like to use that. But that's what this is. This is madness. This never should have happened. We shouldn't be sitting here today. Nichole didn't do this. Nichole Rice, the sister, the daughter, the mother, and the wife, who's sitting here with her whole family right now. It's a ranch family from Velva, North Dakota. She didn't sneak out of her farmhouse in the middle of the night, get Devon Hall's Indian head knife, and stab someone in the chest. She didn't do that. And go back home like nothing ever happened. Just take a step back. Let's walk away from the slides. Let's walk away from 8,000 things that have to go right for us to be sitting here today. All these other people. This is madness. It's a horror movie. I don't think after any of this there's any option to come back with a not guilty verdict. Nichole didn't do this. Thank you guys so much for your time. I know this has been a lot. I know this is a lot out of your lives. This is incredibly stressful. We appreciate you. Nichole appreciates you. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sand. Ms. Sorgan, last word.
Thank you, Your Honor. Oops, let's not trip over cords here. Well, I'm glad that Mr. Sand told us that he's not bashing the police because could have fooled me. I'd like to remind you all of an instruction that you're going to get. What counsel says isn't evidence. What I say is not evidence. Mr. Sand says isn't evidence. Evidence. It's what's on this table. It's what you heard out of that witness stand right there. So I'd like to go through Mr. Sand's points. You heard him say a lot during the course of this trial. This is important for Nichole. This is important. You know who else it's important to? Anita's family, who have been sitting here throughout this whole thing. This is important to the community of Minot. This is important to my office. This is important to MPD. It wasn't just important to Nichole. Now, I do not discount. It is absolutely important to her. I know it is. Mr. Sand told you about, it's got to be like 300 elements. It's got to all line up just for everything to work. That's life, folks. Think about using your common sense and experience. How do things have to line up in order for something else to happen? Every step we take in life leads to something else. He questioned about Laura saying that she was with Marty the entire weekend. The weekend of the first weekend of June of 2007. 18 months later, when Marty committed suicide and they had his funeral, she was with someone else. There's no indication that she was having an affair or that there was an issue the weekend that Anita died. That's a red herring. Mr. Sand wants to continue to harp on that Sergeant Asham didn't review the file. He kept saying, didn't review the file. He left a word out of there, entire file. She didn't work the entire file because she had a partner, Detective Talbot. They split up the work. That much evidence to go through? One person can't do it alone. In fact, you even heard the defense's own expert, Mr. Counts. I glanced at some things. I glanced at it. He didn't do a deep dive on absolutely everything in this file. It was his own testimony. Now, nowhere did you hear that the state's theory of this case is that Nichole went to sleep at the farm, woke up in the middle of the night, made a mad dash to Minot, killed Anita. From the timeline that you saw, and from the statement that she gave to her Aunt Brenda, she left the 41 Club in Russo and went back to the apartment in Minot to get clothes, where she encounters Anita. Anita, who thought she had the apartment all to herself that weekend because Nichole went home every weekend. Anita was not expecting Nichole to show up at home. So her bedroom door was not locked. You heard the testimony from Gordon. Anita's bedroom door was open when they went into that apartment. It wasn't closed. And I'd also like to get back to another point about Gordon's testimony. Mr. Sand told you that Gordon told you the screen was in the yard. Gordon didn't know that because Marty had picked up the screen during his morning rounds and taken it to his shop before Gordon showed up. Gordon wouldn't have seen it in the yard. Now, there has been a lot mentioned about cold justice, that they came to town for 7 days, and in 7 days cracked the case wide open. That's what we just heard. You heard Sergeant Asham tell you that they had the case file a couple of months ahead of time so that they could review everything They came to town for 7 to 10 days for filming and for some interviews. But that this was a collaborative effort and that cold justice was not calling the shots. Cold justice does not make charging decisions in Ward County, North Dakota. Minot PD doesn't even make charging decisions in Ward County, North Dakota. Mr. Sand kept saying MPD can't get things right because the time couldn't be spared. Yeah, cold justice. Kelly Siegler and Steve Spingola came to town. And you heard the testimony from their own expert. Kelly Siegler, seasoned prosecutor. Steve Spingola was a lieutenant with Milwaukee Homicide. These are people with experience who assisted the MPD in this investigation. These weren't just two random people from Hollywood, not two Hollywood people, or Hollywood personas that came in. These are people who actually have worked cases before. Mr. Sand tells you that greed is putting pressure on these people, that there's millions of dollars to be made. Not in my paycheck. Not in Mr. Nelson's paycheck, certainly not in Sergeant Ashton's paycheck. The only person that you've heard has any financial benefit from this case so far is Mr. Counts. Got his $10,000 expert fee. It's the only person that you heard has made any money off of this. You heard Mr. Sand saying, I spent half my week up here going through with witnesses. You're right. On cross-examination, when you were asking them about things that were extraneous to the case. It is not improper to prep witnesses. In fact, that's trial tactics 101. They teach you that in law school. You don't ever ask a question to which you don't already know the answer. So you prep your witnesses, you meet with them. This trial could have been a whole lot longer if we'd have had the witnesses testify to absolutely everything that was in this case file. But we didn't. We had to boil it down to what was relevant and what was important. You've already been here long enough without having to get through that. So he's refreshing witnesses' recollection for investigations that they did 18 years ago. Are you surprised? And then he asks you, oh, but they get forgiven for that, for not remembering something 18 years ago when they've worked how many other investigations since then? But Nichole, not remembering something is a bad thing. Okay, let's explore that. If you're the suspect in a murder and you know that your alibi is important, that your whereabouts are important, wouldn't you know that information cold, no matter how many times you're asked about it? And again, let's look at the timing of these interviews. June 4th, 2007, the date that Anita's body was discovered. June 11th, 2007, a week later. Not enough time for a loss of memory. And remember, in that interview, that's the one that Sergeant Goodman said she was not telling him the truth, and he had to confront her on it. May 6th, 2010. Not even 3 years later. And then the last interview, March 12th, 2022. 15 years after the original interview. So the main interviews, when it was fresh and it was new and there was no time to forget. And you would expect her, wouldn't you, to know where she was if she knows that she's a suspect for a murder. Are you going to expect Detective Barnard to remember something 18 years later when he's retired twice and worked how many cases in the interim? Same thing for Sergeant Goodman, Detective Thompson. a cast of characters. I would like to correct something that Mr. Sand told you. 2 people coming in after, one of whom having drug problems. If you remember the testimony, William May went to St. Cloud for PTSD treatment, not for drug treatment. He tried to make Brenda Glynns out to be a drug addict. She went to a rehab facility to be weaned off of pain medication after she broke her back because she was having seizure activity. And nobody said that Christina or William repeated, they went in multiple times to report this. Nobody said that. They didn't testify to that. They went in once. Nothing came of it. What are they to think? Donna can't remember when she worked at eTelecare. I couldn't begin to tell you the start and end dates of a couple of my past jobs. But Donna remembered those conversations with Nichole because they stuck in her memory. Remember what she told you. The level of concern that she had is what ingrained this into her memory. That she was concerned about how this is escalating between these 2 girls. Brenda was wrong about the year on the trip. She thought it was 2007. It was 2008. What's important is that trip happened. And then Nichole confessed information to her during that. And also, Brenda didn't say that she flew to New Mexico. She said she rode with her ex-husband and then rode back with Nichole. So if we're going to nitpick testimony, let's remember it right. Mr. Sand told you this stuff comes out in these towns about the holdbacks, about the information. Yeah, because Nichole talked about it. She told people. That's how they knew. You heard people tell you that she told them these holdbacks. Mr. Sand is correct. The defense has absolutely no obligation to investigate. But they did. And their own expert didn't even really review the file particularly well, did he? He acknowledged several mistakes that he made in that, such as Devin Hall broke into the apartment complex that's the same building as Anita. You heard him admit, nope, I screwed up. I made a mistake on that. I was wrong. It wasn't the same building. You also heard him say he didn't hear the testimony of these witnesses. And he also didn't review prior deposition testimony from them. Mr. Sand told you, look at the DNA report and look who wasn't tested. You're going to have one heck of a time figuring out who wasn't tested. This lab report is 35 pages long. And you will see that Devin Hall's name is in it. He was tested. They got in a sample from him to review against. You also heard that Nichole was crying at the scene in that very first statement. Yep, she was crying. After she'd been told that if she didn't get there, they were going to come get her. After, that's just my crackhead roommate. I'm not dealing with it. Without any information of what was going on at that apartment, not why are the police trying to get a hold of me? Not what is happening at my apartment. Was there a break-in? Is something missing? No questions whatsoever. And that struck investigators as odd. No concern over Anita whatsoever. You've been told this is a nice North Dakota woman who referred to her roommate as a fucking bitch, fucking cunt. Told her family, I'm fine because I didn't really like Anita anyway. And was more concerned about what happened to that pink iPod of hers than about her deceased roommate, who at one point in an interview, she said, she was my best friend. I looked up to her. I wanted to be like her. Mr. Sand told you that Sergeant Asham was shocked by the train report. No, she wasn't. But in any event, you can judge for yourself what Sergeant Asham's reaction to that was. But I would like to remind you, she had a partner. That would be Detective Talbot. She worked the Devon Hall angle. She's the one who reviewed the train reports. She's the one who reviewed that video, spoke with those witnesses who confirmed that Devon Hall was in Montana and didn't leave Montana until that train departed to head to Minot, which did not arrive until 9:20 p.m. on June 3rd, 2007, at which point in time Anita had been dead since 5 a.m. that morning. And again, this was not Devon Hall's knife. Lastly, that was one of the last points that Mr. Sand brought up. Devon Hall, in an interview, said it looked like a knife that he had taken from Jerome Vivier's, but that he had returned to Jerome's house after having it about a day. And Nova Wetsit brought that knife to the police. You heard testimony that that knife, Jerome's knife that Devon supposedly had, was turned into MPD and placed into their evidence. So it could not possibly be the murder arrest weapon that had been left on Anita's bed, because it was in Nova Wetsit's possession to turn into Minot PD later. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, after reviewing the totality of everything, once again, we urge you to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sorgan. Members of the jury, Mr. Nelson, can I have you move the podium for me, please? Yes, sir.
All right. So that was the closing argument. You'll have to let me know what you think. I thought they both did good. Like I said, I thought that the prosecutor was going to be a little bit more riled up than what she was, but I thought she did a good job. I'm going to show you a picture that I pulled up while this was going on. So this is Anita's bedroom, and some people, even in the case, different policemen, they would see this picture because this is how it looked when they walked in, and they didn't realize that that is Anita dead on the bed. You can see her head, and it kind of looks like a blanket, but they say she was wearing a robe, so it just might be that. But to play devil's advocate just a little bit, they had talked about how with the screen being cut and the height of where it was at, that it would be really hard for somebody to go in and out without actually pulling out the screen or doing more damage. And the prosecutor was going on about how if somebody did that, went through the window from the outside in, that the things with the window, things that were on there and near it, would have all been knocked over and down on the floor. But as you see, she doesn't have a window sill, and there's no furniture that's over there where there would be like trinkets or something on it. So I don't think her argument for that specific thing is very strong, because she wouldn't have had anything up there. It's a very thin little, 2 inches thick, maybe. So I'm not sure though where I think this is going at. I know I put up the the vote for everybody if you think she'll be found guilty or not. And I kind of agree with David that at this point I'm unsure. I could see it going either way, maybe leaning a little bit towards guilty, just because somebody came and testified that Nichole had told her, and you have all of this law enforcement and friends and family even who think that Nichole did it and that she acted really strange and something was just not right. So I guess I'm leaning that direction, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a no either. All right, thank you so much for watching. As we were talking about, they went into deliberations this late afternoon, early evening, and tomorrow they will be back to deliberate, and I would assume that we're going to have a verdict by the end of the day. So we will be on, we'll be watching. If that happens, I'll definitely get it up on the live and we'll watch together. And then from there, we'll find out if sentencing will be right away or if they're going to reschedule. And either way, we will be watching sentencing. I'm hoping that some of the family members will write victim impact statements and that we can just kind of see how Nichole would react, because during this whole trial, she's been pretty stoic. Her aunt, when she was on the stand, might have been the biggest one that Nichole had an emotional reaction, but even still, not a lot. So, all right, thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow.